Did Marvin Harrison Jr. steal the show on the final day of open practices for Cardinals training camp? That's all next and more on this episode of Believe in Arizona Cardinals. Thank you guys again for tuning in, Arizona Cardinals fans. I'm your host, Blake Murphy. You can always follow me and follow the show on X/Twitter at BlakeMurphy7. And we're here to talk about the last day of training camp that's open to the public. There's one more open practice that is always the traditional red and white practice that's going to take place at the end of this upcoming week. But first, the Arizona Cardinals have a game to get to. That's right. This Thursday, preseason football is here. We are finally made it. We'll be here to preview a little bit of that game upcoming for you guys. But first, let's talk a bit and wrap up Cards camp. The biggest thing, as we mentioned to tease the show, was Marvin Harrison Jr. had his best day of camp. He was making catches left and right, getting open separation, had a deep catch all the way down the from a deep pass from Jacoby Brissett that made it all the way down. He also had a huge block on an interesting play design we'll talk about here, but it was a case where when we always talk about you need to block or get the rock, it just showcased a little bit of the confidence that he's been lacking thus far. And I think, honestly, in his best day that he's had of camp, it goes to show that he is potentially ready for a breakout year. Now, as far as some other news, Walter Nolan went down with injury on the Sunday training camp. Was reportedly okay. It was, according to head coach Mike LaFleur, it was just him getting used to a little bit of, with his repaired knee. When you have guys that are trying to get confidence on the knee, when you get guys that get banged up, when things are new, when it comes to getting used to getting back on your feet, seemed like it was one of those things that was a mild scare, but he is okay. He was back out there practicing. One of the guys who was not out there was Trey Benson. He had a knee issue with the knee that he had previously injured, and so we got to see a lot of Bam Knight. The Cardinals also ended up actually trying out running back Jamar Jefferson. So that's something at least where we got to see a little bit more of Bam Knight taking advantage of the opportunity with Trey Benson, who had been running with the threes and some of the twos out there. They were able to at least get a little bit of a glimpse of the undrafted free agent. I think at least when it comes to training camp, these are two of the biggest highlights. You've seen a lot of the talk about Jeremiyah Love, the running back room for the Cardinals. But it comes down to star playmakers who need to explode this year for the Cardinals to be able to actually be a competitive franchise. And that's where all eyes have been on Marvin Harrison Jr., who has not basically lived up to expectations, and Walter Nolan, who did flash according to expectations, but then got hurt and promptly only played in about 6 games last year. That's why all eyes are on these two guys to be healthy and to be able to be productive entering into this 2026 season. Let's talk a little bit more about just today's training camp. This is being recorded, of course, on Monday, August 3rd. It was a veteran day off for quite a few players. Paris Johnson was not out there on the field. Budda Baker was not out there on the field. Isaac Seumalo was not out there on the field. Michael Wilson, actually, was not out there on the field. There was no word on whether it was a veteran's day off or an injury, but by all accounts, it seemed like there wasn't anything to be concerned about with Michael Wilson. He was in street clothes. That, of course, led to another question, which is, could this be a holdout or hold in from Michael Wilson as he seeks a new contract? That's one of the questions I think that for me personally, knowing with what we know about Michael, he's practiced, played thus far. My guess is that he was probably dinged up, will probably come back in. We'll see if he ends up playing or not in the Hall of Fame game. But it is one of those interesting cases where when you talk about guys who are in line to get paid, he did put up 1,000 yards last year and was one of those playmakers that the Arizona Cardinals drastically needed down the stretch, and he delivered. Just like Jacoby Brissett and got his pay raise, I think the Cardinals should go ahead and try to be able to extend Michael Wilson, who is going to have a very valuable role in this Cardinals offense. That being said, if you want to pay 2 guys at the same time between Michael Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr., I would probably stagger the contracts, get Marvin's big extension if he is able to live up to it. Remember, this is the process of what ifs in football don't actually matter compared to what you produce on the field. So far, Michael Wilson has been the wide receiver 1 to Marvin Harrison Jr.'s wide receiver 2 thus far in their NFL careers. But in these scenarios, you want to make sure that you're thinking about your future. And if that's the case, you want to make sure you stagger some of these deals out. And I think that putting Michael Wilson on a 2 to 3 year extension versus the full gambit of 4 years for wide receiver one pay that a Jamar Chase or a T. Higgins would get is probably a little bit much. But I think you can come to a good deal for him somewhere in the range of $25 to maybe $27 million per year as far as an extension for Michael Wilson. And if he takes less than that, then you're considering it to be a steal if you are an Arizona Cardinals fan for a guy who ultimately has shown that he can can have proven production as a wide receiver one in this league. One of the other things that we can talk about here that popped up for the Arizona Cardinals was the first depth chart of the year. Now, there is not very many surprises when it comes to this depth chart, especially at the quarterback position. The running back position, of course, still had Tyler Allgeier listed as the first running back with Jeremiyah Love as the second running back. While this may be a surprise to some people, the answer at least is going to be that this is part of making him earn it. This is part of just what every rookie is going to have to go through as they end up going into the NFL. They are not going to be given the job or having it completely handed to them. It is something that you're going to end up seeing. I think Jeremiyah Love, for all intents and purposes, by the end of the season, will be the Cardinals running back one. And he will get a lot of stretch with the first team to where you can probably call him the running back one. But I think it's going to be probably a bit more similar to the 2015 season, where we saw David Johnson came in as the highly touted running back. Granted, he was a third-round pick, but the Cardinals had a solid veteran in Chris Johnson, who for the first 8 games of the year was essentially the running back one, got the bulk of the carries, and then David Johnson got plays out of the backfield, had some different kick returns and touchdowns. I think that you're going to see a lot more Jeremiyah Love than you did see David Johnson. But it would not shock me if the number of carries ends up being Tyler Allgeier has the most carries, followed by Jeremiyah Love through the first 8 weeks of the season. And he's even gone on to talk about that, meaning Jeremiyah Love, in an interview where he talked about how in college he and Jadarian Price split carries. He was good with the backload, being able to at least take on some of the burden of having to carry the rock back and forth. I think it's something where the Cardinals are going to slow play him versus letting him just be that Saquon Barkley-esque type of back immediately from the get-go. Will that hurt some of his offensive rookie of the year considerations? It might. It may be a spot where you end up seeing it go to Fernando Mendoza start sooner than later. Maybe you end up seeing someone who went to the Titans and Carnell Tate ends up getting a little bit of a nod. But I think it will be better for his long-term chances, and I still think he's going to be the overwhelming favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year because he is going to still get essentially a running back one worthy load for the Arizona Cardinals, but it just might not be that workhorse back role that we have envisioned. With the rest of the depth chart, Isaiah Adams is still in the lead over Chase Besantis at the right guard position. I do not expect that to change. If Isaac Seumalo does miss some time or has a veteran day off like he did today with this practice, we saw Isaiah Adams shift to left guard and Chase Besantis work with the starting right guard, as with the wide receiver one units for the Arizona Cardinals. Or excuse me, did I say wide receiver? I meant offensive line unit for the Arizona Cardinals. This is something that I think Arizona Cardinals fans are hoping that the team will be able to let him go, but it would not shock me if Adams, off field, not with pertaining, does end up and having a hold on the right guard job going through week 1, week 2, week 3, and then perhaps after week 4, we start to see a little bit more of Chase Besantis mixed in with the team. Something that's been a little bit interesting has been the right and left tackle spots. Paris Johnson Jr., while getting a veteran day off, saw Josh Fryer and 7th-round pick Jaden Williams was actually shifting in at times. He's right now the backup right tackle behind Elijah Wilkinson. I would think that Josh Fryer would get first dibs there onto that spot as far as the swing tackle would go if Wilkinson were to go down to injury. But the fact that they have a 7th-round draft pick, they're already putting a load on as far as being the second-team guy, and in some cases, taking on first-team reps while Paris Johnson Jr. is out. That's a big deal. It's where you hope that the Cardinals could find someone who at least is a steady backup player that you're able to find in the 7th round. Would be a good boon for Monty Austin for it. Previously, a guy like this they found in the 6th round was Dante Stills, who has been a rotational piece that they've had on the defensive line. Not good enough to be a starter, but always good enough to stay healthy and beat out the guy behind him to be able to keep a lock on that depth spot. It's something at least that is important to find in every NFL draft if you can, is to get a day 3 pick to be able to hit. And it's something we'll be watching carefully for the Cardinals this year. Also of interest on the depth chart at the wide receiver spot, Jalen Brooks is holding off Emir Smith-Marset so far for the second team wide receiving spot on the offensive side of the ball. And we're seeing Simi Fehoko, at least with special teams and some of the size that he has. He's got the second team look right now, along with Devin Duvernay behind Michael Wilson and Kendrick Bourne. But we'll talk a little about Reggie Virgil and how he seemingly is making a huge push for the roster. I think that he's going to end up being one of those guys who could eventually end up hitting your second team and being a guy behind Marvin Harrison Jr. But for now, he's going to have to beat out Jalen Brooks, and we will see how that goes throughout the rest of the Cardinals offseason as we approach the regular season. When it comes to the defensive side of the ball, there are an interesting setup, at least, for where Darius Robinson is not a starter. He is listed as Darius Robinson at the starting defensive tackle, or Dante Stills is listed there. The defensive side of the ball, same with Roy Lopez or Andrew Billings, are listed as the starters at the nose tackle spot. I think it's very likely that it depends on whether it's a 3-4 front or 4-3 front, whatever you want to call it. Everyone's a hybrid front now when it comes to defense in the NFL. But you see the same thing at outside linebacker. Zaven Collins and Baron Browning are listed both at the first team for outside linebacker, and Denzel Burke and Max Melton are listed at the outside corner spot for cornerback number 2 behind Will Johnson. This is really interesting to me because Max Melton is a second-round pick. You want to be able to see him starting. The fact that he hasn't is a concern. But then on the other hand, you got Denzel Burke, a 5th-round rookie, who's at least in the starting spot, and so far has been kind of the number 2 corner throughout most of training camp. What's to make of all of that? It's probably just a case where the Cardinals don't have a true number 2 corner yet. Outside of maybe the likes of Sean Murphy-Bunting gets back in there, but I think that Sean Murphy-Bunting is a lock for the nickel corner position, not the outside corner position, as he's only played thus far in the nickel in camp. The last little bit of maybe a shocker, but not too shocking if you've been paying attention to what we've talked about on this podcast before, is Andrew Wingard at safety has been starting over the likes of Dadrian Taylor-Demerson when it comes to the safety spot, while Keaton Crawford has been holding it over Isaiah Oliver, Joey Blunt. We will see what Wyatt Williams Jr. is able to do if he's able to make the roster. I think that it's going to be a difficult spot for him. He'll have to overtake Isaiah Oliver, hold off an athletic freak in Keaton Crawford to be able to make the final 53. I think it's more likely that he ends up being a practice squad candidate for the year. Otherwise, on the depth chart, we're seeing that Cody Simon is holding off the likes of Owen Papo and Jack Gibbons in that starting linebacker role and has had another interception to be able to go. So he's had 2 interceptions, I believe, by my count, this training camp. That's something at least that we wanted to see, not the athleticism, because he, as a 5th-round player, didn't have the most athletic profile as a linebacker. But the instincts and playmaking abilities he had is part of why the Cardinals are depending on him at the inside linebacker spot. One of the guys who's also listed at the starting offensive linebacker spot, but it's in parentheses, is Josh Sweat, who has been still on the pup list and has had no questions, at least as far as whether he will be ready for the start of the season, according to head coach Mike LaFleur. But a lot of questions as to how much of this is injury related. Is this simply him with his knee issues that he's trying to kind of do his own thing where he gets ready for the gets ready through the offseason for the rigors of the NFL in his own way? Or how much of this could be potentially about that trade request that was reportedly rumored as soon as Jonathan Gannon was let go and fired? Could it be where he's not happy with the team and stashing him on the pup list is part of what the Arizona Cardinals are doing to try to kind of massage the issue and ignore it? I think what it comes down to is there's 2 and only 2 outcomes that's going to happen here with Josh Sweat. Option number 1 is he makes a big stink about it, has to do it publicly, where he then ends up getting traded from the Arizona Cardinals. Maybe things go behind closed doors where he ends up being dealt. I think his value would be somewhere around the likes of a 3rd-round pick. I think the Cardinals would want back a 2nd-round pick because you're not going to want to just let a guy go for a top 100 pick versus getting a round 2 pick that you could parlay into trading 2 second-round picks to move up and get a first-round caliber pass rusher like Josh Sweat has been. I think that's the first option. The second option is kind of a boring one, but it's that he's just going to be ready to roll for week 1 and goes out there and performs like every other Arizona Cardinal will do because he did sign that contract with the team, and whether or not he's happy about that contract, it is just ultimately the way that players get paid is by going out, performing, and producing. And perhaps this is the case where the Cardinals and Jacoby Brissett are similar to where he's at. He may want to say, hey, I want to get out of my deal sooner, try to find a different team. Can we get me a little bit more guarantees, void one of my years? Like, I don't know what may be going on behind closed doors, if that is the reason. I don't even know if it is injury related, but what I can say is that I am currently not concerned about Josh Sweat. The time that I'll be concerned about Josh Sweat will be when things are made public, if there is something going on, or if for some reason he is not out there week one, says that the knee is still bothering him, and he just essentially decides to kind of not fight through the injury or whatever ends up happening. My belief is the same as Mike LaFleur's. I think there's full confidence he's going to be out there for the Arizona Cardinals come week one. And the Cardinals need him. They do not have another pass rusher on the team and would not be able to bring any other pass rushers in to replace him at this point in time. Now, one of the other things of news that we can talk about is the Arizona Cardinals did end up letting go of a few players. They ended up, I believe, cutting Tawan Palmer, the longtime former draft pick of Monty Austin in the 7th round, was released. The Cardinals feel pretty comfortable, I would say, about the late round guys that they have, or I should say the lower on the depth chart guys that they would have, such as Jalen Brooks, Amir Smith-Marset, Xavier Weaver. Bryson Green has even flashed a little bit, and there was a touchdown pass from Carson Beck to Harrison Wallace earlier today on a deep passing route. I think it was a 9 route, which is going to be the players running straight down on the post. Just lofted that in there nicely to Harrison Wallace, who kind of came back a little bit for the ball for the touchdown. Cardinals are fine there. Where they're not fine is going to be on the defensive line. They ended up signing defensive tackle Broderick Martin as they send P.J. Mustipher to injured reserve and may end P.J. Mustipher's season. He ended up going to IR. There's a chance that they could bring him back off of IR, but a lot of times with guys who are lower on the depth chart, like where he is, they end up just being kind of stashed for a year, and then maybe they get activated and come off, but it depends again on how healthy a team is throughout the season. Cardinals also tried out, as we said earlier, Jamar Jefferson at running back, while Trey Benson was out hurt with the same knee that gave him problems last year, was giving him some problems this year. Ultimately, it's a case where I think the Cardinals don't have enough running back depth between Bam Knight probably making the team, Corey Kiner being a special teams guy that could run the ball a lot. With Trey Benson out and James Conner kind of on ice for now, while they're just letting him be able to get over his Achilles injury and not actually have to worry about doing more than individual and drill work. It does seem like they're probably going to be putting Jeremiyah Love and treating him like a starter along with Tyler Allgeier, which means a tons of reps for Bam Knight. If he's going to be a special teams kickoff guy, you can't just let Bam Knight go out there and take a ton of punishment and then let Corey Kiner take over. You may have to actually bring in a guy like a Jamar Jefferson. I don't think this has anything to do with Trey Benson being traded from the team. I think it's more simply they got 2 guys in their lineup in positions number 3 and 4 in James Conner and Trey Benson, who are kind of banged up, and they're going to bring in another guy for depth. Some overall things for training camp as we'll wrap up kind of talking about camp, and then we'll do a little preview of the game as far as what we'll look at for the Hall of Fame game this week. We'll also have another show coming for you later this week to specifically focus on that and wrapping up the first preseason game. But let's talk a little bit about the biggest topic here in training camp, which is Carson Beck, who had his best day and then promptly went out and broke what his best day was by having a rough finish for everything today. He had his best day of practice. He was pushing the ball downfield, is able to actually had 2 touchdowns in 11-on-11 play. Had a nice pass that he was able to make over the middle and looked a lot more comfortable. He even had times where he was running around or able to step up in the pocket, deliver the ball. And then it came to the 2-minute drill, which he had executed pretty well originally. This time, the 2-minute drill, not so much. He got intercepted once by Wyatt Williams on a miscommunication. Had a throw that was kind of off his back foot over the middle of the field that bounced off of the receiver's hands, could have been intercepted, and just looked a little bit shaky. And this has kind of been what Carson Beck has looked like throughout camp. Now, he went from being a guy who didn't make any of those deep passing plays and touchdowns to a guy who now had a best day of camp with some passing touchdowns. But he's still not ready yet. And as far as for when he's going to be ready, I think the time frame is not going to be early in the season. It's going to be later in the season because that consistency is what builds you as an NFL starter. While we've seen some good highs for Carson Beck, the highs have not superseded what we've seen from Jacoby Brissett. In fact, we've seen a few lows from Gardner Minshew at camp, but we've not seen the lows of missing a guy on a 5-yard out like we've seen from Carson Beck. And I don't think it's anything to do with how his future is, but there's talk, at least on Twitter, like Kirk Benkert, who is a guy who gets some publicity, at least, as a former NFL quarterback. It's like, oh, maybe this is the steal of the draft. Look at how he executed this throw across the middle with confidence. Yeah, it was a great throw. But you're not seeing him play like Russell Wilson as a third-round pick out of the gate where he's going to dethrone your starters and be starting in time for week 1. I think some of that will have to be told with how the preseason goes. But just from training camp alone, he has not lit it up this training camp. He has looked like a third-round pick and a rookie at best. And I think a lot of Cardinals fans who are hoping, hey, if Carson Beck's going to be the guy, we should go ahead, see what we're going to have. That's the hope you're looking at because you know last year was 1-11 with Jacoby Brissett. You know that Gardner Minshew has struggled to win at the NFL level. So there's that hope that you can get something out of Carson Beck. And I'm here to tell you, don't hope in that place for Carson Beck just yet. He still has a ways to go before you can kind of anoint him as this next NFL quarterback. Before you can even put him into the starting lineup, he's going to have to earn it. And that's one of the biggest things that I think that the Cardinals are showcasing in camp is that he is making progress. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not like we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to Carson Beck. Slow and steady progress is what you need from him, and he's continuing to show that, but he's also showing some lows that show that he's not ready to grasp that starting job just yet. A couple of other notes, at least from today. Blake Gillikin had a poor day punting. We'll see if there's no reason to really be concerned about that unless there's poor punting in the Hall of Fame game itself. Trey McBride, he got a bit banged up, took a hit over the middle, stood by the sideline out for a little bit. And then what did he do? Came back in, caught a touchdown pass. What a filthy, filthy player. And what a stud Trey McBride has been. He has been one of the best acquisitions that Arizona Cardinals fans have had to root for in recent memory. It was one of those places where he showcased himself to be durable as well as being able just to be a matchup nightmare for any defender. It's one of those places where Arizona can be proud of Trey McBride. And the fact that he's going to be catching passes in Arizona for years to come is something that should excite every Cardinals fan. Other last thoughts on the training camp for the Arizona Cardinals is a lot of offside penalties, a lot of false start penalties. The blocking up front has led some issues to be desired, unfortunately. There's been some areas that I think the Cardinals need to do a bit better at when it comes to how they're doing their run blocking. I think some of it may come with time, but it would not shock me with that early start to their schedule if the Cardinals have to throw the ball a lot because they're still getting used to some of the run blocking. And I think a big part of that is they're missing Tip Ryman in 13 personnel. They're then having to then run out 11 personnel. They're missing one of their best blockers and a guy who can help with double team blocks for Elijah Wilkinson on the right tackle side as well. I think at least also that the Cardinals showcased a lot of outside zone runs, which is part of this Sean McVay scheme, and some bubble screens, whether to Michael Wilson or Trey McBride. Some of those things that have driven Cardinals fans crazy over the years from the Rams on the defensive side, we've seen those pieces of the Rams offense in Mike LaFleur's system. That's something to root for if you're a Cardinals fan. It's also something to dread, perhaps, if you're watching this on the defensive side of the ball. Because I think the Cardinals are still a step down from being an NFL defense. We're still seeing Denzel Burke get out there and get roasted by Marvin Harrison Jr. We're seeing Michael Wilson make some dynamic plays. And this is all with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. I think that the defense is going to give more fits to Cardinals fans than we would like, in the passing game especially. But that doesn't mean that I think that they're going to necessarily be a defense that doesn't have some outstanding plays that they can make. If Walter Nolan can step up, if Budda Baker can still have a solid year. The big thing for the Cardinals this year is that I think they're going to give up yards, but if they can generate turnovers with some of these different playmaking, getting sacks at least with Josh Sweat and Walter Nolan up front, if they can find another playmaker whether that is Jordan Birch or the likes of Roy Lopez up front, if they're able to get a little bit out of Varen Browning. Maybe this is the year Zayvon Collins flashes. Who knows? If they can get just a little bit more out of their defense and get Garrett Williams back starting week 1, so you don't have to try Sean Murphy Bunting out there, then this maybe at least could be a fun offense and a okay, good enough to kind of hold bend but don't break defense that may be passable enough if you're a Cardinals fan. So this could be a competitive sort of roster, not a competing roster necessarily, but one that at least is not getting trucked like they were at the end of the Jonathan Gannon era, losing games 30 to 40 points to 18. Let's see if that's going to wrap it up here for us talking about training camp. When it comes to the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers, what do we want to watch? And I think the biggest thing to watch, honestly, for me is the story of this camp. Marvin Harrison Jr. dropped 2 balls, went national for it. He then has bounced back every single way and has gotten better every single day to the point where he looks like he's a breakout star in the making. Jeremiyah Love, does he get any play in the Hall of Fame game? Do we see Michael Wilson actually play, or is there an injury issue that he's been battling? And at the end of the day, how does everything play out for the safeties and the defensive backs for who's going to actually be the starter when it comes to cornerback 2, safety number 1? Will it even matter? And of course, the biggest thing to be watching, of course, is how does Carson Beck play in the Hall of Fame game? I think that we're going to see a quarterback ranking from the likes of Mike LaFleur. He said that he will mention it on Tuesday. So by the time that you listen to this podcast, it may be out by now. But the thing we know, at least for sure, is that Carson Beck is going to see some time to play against the Panthers backups in the Hall of Fame game with some guys that he's been able to actually make a little bit of traction with. Bryson Green's made some good catches. He had the touchdown to Harrison Wallace today. We're going to see Carson Beck against another NFL defense that's not the Cardinals, and that is, I think, going to be something that is critical for his development. Especially because, as we've talked about on this podcast, you have to know what you've got in Carson Beck before you can make a quarterback decision for the year 2027. Now, unless Jacoby Brissett goes and floors all of us, it's probable that the Cardinals are going to be looking still for their long-term starter, and there's always a chance that maybe he outprices himself, and we'll see how that goes. The last thing to be able to look for is just coming out of the game healthy. That's what preseason is all about, is about getting guys in, making some plays, and then making sure you can get to the next game. Because ultimately, you're not playing for the wins and losses in that column. So it's a tough thing when you can lose guys to injury because it's happened before. Everyone remembers the Jonathan Cooper leg break that pretty much derailed his entire NFL career that happened in a preseason game after he was drafted by the Cardinals in 2013. You don't want to see anything like that for any of your starters, so health is going to be the number one thing to watch when it comes to this preseason game. That'll wrap it up here for this edition of Believe in Arizona Cardinals. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Make sure you leave a 5-star rating and write a review. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Again, for everyone at Believe, I'm Blake Murphy. Thank you guys again, and go Cardinals.